UFC Fight Night Lerone Murphy versus Josh Emmett just wrapped up. And I'm going to be honest, this card was okay. Wasn't really anything amazing. And that's kind of a theme I've been noticing over the last few months, even ever since UFC 300, that the quality of the UFC cards just hasn't been the same as what it used to be, in my opinion. It used to be very fun, very entertaining experiences, but now it kind of gets to the point where either the main events are generally underwhelming, the undercard is generally underwhelming, or even if there is some high quality name value on the card, a lot of times it's just boring grappling matches, right? And I'm not one of those people who despise grappling, but I am one of those people who doesn't like watching someone hold someone up against the fence for 15 minutes, not try to do any damage, not trying to finish the fight. If you are an exciting grappler, I can get on board, right? For example, Khabib. Khabib was like the staple of an exciting grappler because he would take you down, but he would maul you, right? You were watching a massacre. That was very, very entertaining. It wasn't just some boring lay and pray, boring wrestler match. Like, I wanted to start off, actually, though, with the main event. Lerone Murphy defeats Josh Emmett by way of unanimous decision. This fight was a clear-cut example of pure power versus technique and overall skill. And you could tell that it was definitely frustrating Josh Emmett. The only thing I would say is that maybe the referee could have taken a point. And that's another issue I wanted to get into with MMA, is that referees just don't take away points enough. They constantly warn fighters, keep your hands closed, don't kick to the groin, whatever. And yet fighters still continue to do it, and they do not face any sort of consequences of point deductions, which I do very well believe that there should have been a point deducted, considering Lerone Murphy was continuously keeping his hand open, despite the fact that Jason Herzog was saying, hey, you cannot be doing that, keep your hands closed. Poke Josh Emmett in the eye, gives him a stern warning, and then lands a shot to the back of the head that actually caused a cut on Josh Emmett, yet the referee still refused to take a point. Now, there's going to be a lot of people who criticize Lerone Murphy's performance because of the fact that he kind of just, I don't want to say ran, but he fought an intelligent fight. He did what he had to do to get the victory, and it may seem kind of boring, and it was a bit boring, but to be fair, Josh Emmett didn't exactly do himself any favors either. Josh Emmett there were points where I felt like he could have entered more with combinations. There are certain things I would like to see Josh Emmett do more in his fight. I'd like to see him use a jab more. I want to see him use more leg kicks because that would have helped slow down the movement of Lerone Murphy, which could have helped landed a big right hand. I liked it when he was going to the body with those right hands, set up that shot to the head, and slow down Lerone. I like the fact that Josh Emmett was trying some wrestling. I like the fact that he was mixing up the game. This was probably the best that he has looked in quite some time, and Lerone Murphy did exactly what he had to do. But can we just briefly talk about Josh Emmett throwing Lerone Murphy in the air? This guy had air time for a solid 3 seconds. It felt like it was a very long time. It probably actually wasn't a long time, but in the moment it looked like that Lerone Murphy was absolutely flying. That was absolutely epic, absolutely amazing. But I will say, not an absolute barn banger of a fight, but if you take a look at the UFC rankings and you want to see who would be next for Lerone Murphy, I know he wants a top 5, top 3 performance, or top 3 ranked featherweight, but the only issue is that after a fight like that, I just don't think you should give him a top 5 fighter. The only top 5 fighter that you can realistically give him is Movsar Evloev, because Yair Rodriguez is fighting Patricio Pitbull, Diego Lopez is fighting Volkanovski, and Max Holloway is left the division. So unless you're going to give him Movsar Evloev, then you're going to have to give him Brian Ortega, which personally, I'm fine with either one of those two matches. I think that if Josh Emmett's taking you down, which Josh Emmett has not used his wrestling in quite some time, then I believe that Movsar absolutely can. And Brian Ortega, I think that Lerone Murphy would beat Brian Ortega, so I think that's a good step up in competition for him. As for Josh Emmett, it depends on where he goes from here, because he could absolutely stick around this division. He proved that he's still competitive, but if you want to give him an interesting fight, you could give him Arnold Allen, you could give him Aljamain Sterling, Giga Shikaze. You guys take your pick on that one. I think that any one of those fights work. I don't know, though, if Josh Emmett is going to continue fighting or not, because honestly, he is 40 years old, or if he's not 40, he's definitely about to turn 40. He's just not in his athletic prime anymore, and in the featherweight division, it just doesn't work out very well for those types of guys who tend to, stick around for far too long. Then the co-main event, Pat Sabatini beat Joe Anderson Brito. Not really much to say about this fight. It was just a lot of ground control time. I believe it was like 13 and a half minutes of ground control time or something like that. Wasn't a barn burner fight, but Pat Sabatini did what he had to do. He was trying to finish the fight. It wasn't the most boring grappling match I've ever seen, but it wasn't the best thing ever. But that just goes to show how good Diego Lopez is. That guy made Pat Sabatini look like he was absolutely nothing. But not a whole lot to say on this fight. Good performance from Pat Sabatini, to be honest with you. But I did want to talk about the Korean Khabib, or I guess he said he wants to be called the Korean Marab. Lee Chang-ho beats, I'm going to butcher this name and I apologize in advance, Cortavius Romius. I don't know how you pronounce this guy's name. I'm sorry, I'm not really good with names. But what I will say is Lee Chang-ho was definitely ferocious in there. And I could see why people were calling him the Korean Khabib, because he's just very relentless, forward pressure, a bit of wild striking, but that's okay, because he's doing it to set up takedowns. Once he gets you on the ground, he's just ferocious. He's a marauder. The thing is, I know he said he wants to be seen as like the Korean Marab, but the only issue with that is that Marab does not deal nearly as much damage in his fights as someone like Khabib. Like, yes, Marab absolutely utilizes pace as a weapon, but he doesn't really utilize damage. He more just kind of gets on top of you, controls you, lets you back up, and takes you down. He more so is just there to straight up torture you for 25 minutes, but he's not going to finish you most likely, unless you're Marlon Moraes. Whereas Khabib is smashing. He's like a friggin' ape on top of you, grounding and pounding. And while Lee Chang-ho may not have the grappling capability of someone like Khabib, he's not there yet. He is still very young in his UFC career. He's not even ranked yet. Let's give this guy some time to develop, because you gotta remember that Khabib wasn't exactly the most clean and polished fighter and got himself into some interesting positions at times when he first joined the UFC. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. I think that he's got a very bright future ahead. If I were him, I would maintain the whole thing of the Korean Khabib, because I think that being the Korean Marab just kind of implies holding people up against the cage. And while, yes, it is utilizing a fast pace, it's not really doing a lot of damage, whereas Khabib would do actual damage. But if you want to talk about a good fight, Brad Tavares beating Gerald Meerschaert by way of decision, this was a pretty good fight. It was a pretty good example that Brad Tavares is a good veteran of the game, was able to stop every single takedown from Gerald Meerschaert, and was able to keep it on the feet and outstrike him. Not really a whole lot to say about this fight, but it was a good solid performance, and I think that if Brad Tavares wants to keep going, I don't even know who he could fight. I mean, I guess he could fight like Chris Weidman or something. Like, I don't even know who he could possibly fight, because he probably should stick to veterans fights. I don't think he should be going after ranked contenders or anything like that. We move on to Ode Osborne, taking away the record, the undefeated record of Luis Garul, who, this guy was a Contender Series short fight notice type of guy, came in and took on Ode Osborne, who, Ode Osborne's the kind of guy that the UFC seems to throw like young up-and-coming fighters as like a stepping stone, and that's what this fight was meant to be. But Ode Osborne's so fast, caught him with the left hand and finished him. And even though, Louis fought a good first round, was able to take down Ode Osborne, control him for a bit, but ultimately got finished, because it's what happens when you get lazy, especially against fast and powerful fighters like Ode Osborne. But Osborne kind of reminds me of like a Terrence McKinney kind of. Like, he's extremely fast, extremely powerful, but has a weakness to grappling. But, tall, long, fast, southpaw. Kind of just reminds me a little bit like a Terrence McKinney type. But I wanted to talk about something that was very hyped up, right? Taurus Finney versus Robert Valentin was a fight that, I wouldn't say it was the most hyped up thing in the world, but Finney was definitely relatively hyped up coming into this fight. Being an undefeated middleweight, he's kind of like the middleweight version of DC in a way. Short, stocky, extremely muscular. Definitely more muscular than DC was, but standing at 5 feet 8 inches tall and fighting at middleweight, this guy, he's a very, very good wrestler, but he kind of showed that that's pretty much all he has to his game. He did not really throw any sort of strikes whatsoever. He pretty much just shot takedowns, went 8 for 17 on his takedowns. So you could tell that he's very ferocious. He did start to get a little bit tired towards the end, but when you're that big and muscular and you're picking big, heavy dudes up constantly and throwing them around, it's not that shocking. But what is shocking is the fact that he actually got outstruck. And this is what I was talking about before with like wrestlers who just hold you up against the cage. That was this fight here. To be honest with you, to be 100% frank, recently I hadn't been watching as many fights as usual. I'd kind of just taken a step back for a little bit. I come back, and the first fight I see is Torres Finney holding Robert Valentin on the ground for 15 minutes. A bit of a snooze fest, to be honest with you, but there is a bigger issue here within this fight that I wanted to talk about, and that was the judges' scorecard. Did you guys see that? Did you guys see that judges' scorecard? Who was it that scored at 30-27 for Robert Valentin? I could see you giving him the third round because he actually landed damage, but saying that he won the first 2 rounds is just ridiculous. Now, to be fair to the judge, I don't think that the judge is correct. I do think Torres Finney should have won 29-28. However, in the first 2 rounds, there also wasn't really any damage. And the only thing I could think of is that maybe this judge is going purely off damage, because control time doesn't matter if you don't do anything with it. And I'm wondering if that's what this judge was thinking when he was scoring these rounds for Robert Valentin. But let me know what you guys thought of this card overall. I'd probably give it like a 5 out of 10. Nothing too crazy here. But good news is that we got this done and over with. I really wanted Josh Emmett to win, unfortunately. I hope he doesn't retire, because he showed he's still capable. He just needs to work on certain things. More jabbing, more leg kicks. I would like to see him go to the body a bit more. If he works on those 3 things, I think he'd become a much more successful featherweight. But he's 40. He's probably not going to be working on anything too major at this point of his career. But the next video I make will probably be the prediction of Volkanovski versus Diego Lopez. And I'll go through the entire main card for this upcoming fight, or upcoming UFC 314 card. But let me know what you guys thought of this Fight Night card. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe for more content. And I'll see you guys later. Peace.